The night I proposed to Ethan still lives inside me like a scar that never healed right, faint but tender when touched. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. Instead, it became the moment I stopped believing in forever. The rooftop twinkled with fairy lights, 1,000 tiny stars strung above us. Music pulsed faintly from hidden speakers. The city spread below in a sea of glitter and motion. Our friends were gathered, laughing, glasses clinking, everyone beautifully unaware of what was about to shatter. I remember clutching the small velvet box in my hand. My palms were sweating. I kept wiping them on my dress, whispering my little speech under my breath. Ethan was across the room, his arms slung around Sophie, my best friend. I didn't think much of it then. They'd always been close, and Sophie was radiant that night, wearing the gold dress I'd helped her choose. She caught me looking and grinned, mouthing, "You got this." I smiled back. My heart raced. At midnight, as the countdown began, 10, 9, 8, I stepped into the center of the terrace. The crowd cheered, raising glasses. Ethan turned toward me, eyes half drunk, half curious. I dropped to one knee. For a second, everything went still. Even the music seemed to pause. I opened the box, revealing the simple silver ring I'd chosen, not extravagant, just honest, like the love I thought we had. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling, "you once told me I made you believe in home again. I want to build that home with you. Will you marry me?" The silence that followed wasn't romantic. It was thick, uncomfortable, like air before a storm. Then Ethan laughed. At first, I thought it was nervous laughter. I tried to smile, waiting for the moment he'd kneel too, or pull me up, or say something kind. But he didn't. The laughter deepened, rippling outward, infecting the others around us until a few joined in awkwardly. Then he said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'd rather stay single than marry you." The words cut through the night like glass. I froze. For a heartbeat, I couldn't even breathe. My fingers loosened, the ring slipped from my hand, rolled across the wooden floor, and disappeared beneath a table. Someone tried to laugh again, but it died quickly. The only sound left was the wind, hissing through the lights. Ethan looked at me with that smirk he used when he thought he was being clever. "Come on, Clara. You know I'm not the marrying type." His voice was light, teasing, as if I'd made an embarrassing mistake. My cheeks burned. My vision blurred. I wanted to speak, to ask why or how or what I'd done wrong, but then I saw it, the way Sophie's eyes flicked toward him. A half-second glance. A silent thread of guilt that said everything. My stomach dropped. I'd seen that look before, the quiet understanding between them, the shared smiles I dismissed as friendship. But in that moment, under the fairy lights and the eyes of everyone we knew, I realized I had been the punchline of a private joke that had lasted months. Someone tried to put a hand on my shoulder, but I brushed them off. My ears were ringing. I don't even remember what Ethan said next, some hollow attempt at humor, something about not ruining the party. I walked away before I could cry. The elevator ride down felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored walls didn't even look like me. Mascara smudged, lips trembling, that hopeful spark gone from my eyes. I remember thinking, so this is what it feels like to be humiliated completely. When I reached the street, the night air was cold and sharp. I took off my heels and carried them barefoot down the pavement. My phone buzzed again and again. Calls, texts, probably Sophie, maybe him, but I didn't look. I just walked until the city swallowed the sound. I ended up on a bench near the river, the lights rippling over the black water. The ring, the laughter, the flash of Sophie's eyes, they replayed in loops until I couldn't tell which hurt more, the betrayal or the realization that I had been blind to it. I remembered the perfume Sophie had started wearing, Ethan's favorite, the one I'd once used. The faint traces of it that clung to his shirts. I'd noticed it, but I hadn't seen it. Love makes you blind, yes, but sometimes it also makes you stupid. A group of strangers passed by, their laughter echoing into the night. I envied them, their lightness, their innocence. I felt stripped bare, like the city itself had turned its back on me. I didn't cry right away. That came later, when I finally got home and found his jacket on the couch, his glass half full on the counter, our photo on the wall. My knees gave out then. I sank to the floor and cried until my throat ached. Somewhere between the sobs, I noticed something, a folded napkin sticking out of his jacket pocket. I pulled it out, hands shaking. Scribbled on it, in Sophie's handwriting, were 3 words. "You owe me." That was when my tears stopped. Something inside me went cold, not angry yet, not vengeful, just still, like water freezing overnight. I placed the napkin on the table beside the empty ring box. I sat there for hours, watching the city lights flicker through the window until dawn crept over the skyline. And I promised myself one thing. This story wouldn't end with humiliation. It would end with the truth. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what love looked like, I would have said, him. Ethan. The man with the easy smile and the quiet confidence that seemed to fill every room before he even spoke. We met at a charity art auction. I was there as a volunteer, hanging paintings, sweeping floors between champagne spills. He was the guest of honor, a young architect being celebrated for designing some eco-sleek office tower downtown. When I dropped a frame and cursed under my breath, he laughed, knelt beside me, and helped me rehang it. That's how it started, not with fireworks, but with gentleness. Or what I thought was gentleness. He loved my art. He'd stand behind me while I painted, tracing the air around my shoulders like he was sketching me in invisible ink. "You see the world differently," he'd whisper. "That's why I need you." And I believed him. I believed every word. When we moved in together, I left my job at the art school. He said I didn't need to worry about money, that I should focus on painting, on creating. It sounded romantic then, almost noble. But slowly, my canvases started gathering dust. I painted less, and cleaned more. He filled the house with his things. Minimalist furniture, neutral tones, smooth surfaces that reflected everything but felt like nothing. My brushes stayed packed in boxes. He said my paintings cluttered the walls. I used to tell myself he was right, that he just liked things simple, that he wasn't erasing me, he was refining our life. But love shouldn't feel like you're shrinking to fit inside someone else's world. My mother noticed first. She came to visit one weekend, took one look at me, and said quietly over tea, "You're not laughing the same, Clara." I brushed it off. "I'm just tired." She glanced at the bare walls. "He doesn't like your art?" "He prefers open space," I replied. She nodded, but her eyes softened with a sadness that unsettled me. Open space can start to look like emptiness when you lose yourself in it. I remember snapping a little then, telling her she didn't understand, that Ethan was good to me, that he believed in my talent. But that night, when he came home and barely looked up from his phone as I told him about her visit, something inside me twisted. He only asked, "She didn't say anything to embarrass you, did she?" It sounded protective, but the tone was cold, like a warning. Still, I stayed. Because I loved him. Because I thought relationships were about compromise. And Sophie. She was my constant. My anchor. We met in college, and she'd always been the wild one. Spontaneous, fearless, the type to dance barefoot in rainstorms and flirt with waiters for free desserts. When Ethan and I got together, she was thrilled. "You finally found someone who gets you," she said. In the beginning, they were awkward around each other. She teased him. He tolerated it. But after a while, they found common ground. Music, travel, the sort of sarcastic humor I didn't quite share. I used to smile watching them banter. It made me feel like I'd built something perfect, love that even my best friend could adore. But over time, little things started to gnaw at me. I'd walk into a room and find them mid-conversation, voices hushed, smiles fading too quickly. Or I'd notice Sophie's perfume lingering in our hallway after she'd left, the same scent Ethan once bought me for my birthday, before he told me it didn't suit my age anymore. When I asked if something was off, they both laughed. "You're being paranoid, Clara," Sophie said once, squeezing my shoulder. "You think too much." And maybe I did. I'd always been that way, overthinking, overfeeling. So I swallowed it. I told myself friendship could look like closeness, that laughter between them wasn't betrayal, that love couldn't coexist with deceit. But small details started collecting in my mind like dust. The lipstick stain on Ethan's coffee mug when I hadn't worn lipstick in days. The second toothbrush that appeared in our bathroom drawer, identical to mine. The message preview that flashed on his phone one night, "We need to be more careful." He said it was a coworker. I believed him. Or maybe I wanted to. Because love is easier to protect than it is to question. I remember one particular night, about a month before the party. I'd painted for the first time in weeks, a small canvas of a wilted rose trapped inside a glass jar. It was meant to be symbolic, though I didn't know of what yet. When Ethan came home, I showed it to him shyly. He stared for a few seconds, then said, "It's depressing." I laughed softly. "It's supposed to be reflective." He tilted his head. "Well, it reflects someone who needs to get out more." Then he changed the subject to a new project he was designing. I didn't argue. But that night, I covered the painting with a white sheet. The next morning, I found it in the trash. That was the day something in me started to wilt too. He'd stopped calling me beautiful months ago. His compliments were replaced with instructions. "Wear the blue dress, it looks classier. Don't talk so much at dinner. You sound emotional when you argue." I became smaller, quieter, smoother, like one of his polished surfaces. When I told Sophie I was thinking of proposing to him, she paused. Just a flicker, half a second, but I noticed. Then she smiled and said, "You sure he's ready for that?" I laughed nervously. "He's not great with surprises, but, yes." She leaned closer. "Just make sure it's what you want, Clara. Not what he made you think you need." I didn't understand what she meant until much later. I thought I was building a life. But I was being built, molded, managed, remade. Every part of me that was once bright was dimmed so he could shine. When I think back now, I don't remember the love as much as I remember the silence, the kind that fills a room when you've already given up speaking. That's how it was in those final months before the rooftop party. Ethan laughing with Sophie while I watched. My art hidden. My voice muted. And somewhere deep inside, the woman I used to be, clawing quietly for air. By the time I bought that silver ring, I wasn't trying to hold on to love. I was trying to remind myself it still existed. It started with the mirror. A small, round vanity mirror I'd had since college, the one with the cracked edge that always made my reflection look slightly fractured. I used to joke that it showed me my truest self. I didn't realize how true that would become. That morning, I noticed lipstick on it, a shade too bright, too coral, not mine. For a moment, I stared, trying to remember if I'd used something new. But my cosmetics drawer had been untouched for days. My stomach tightened. Ethan was in the shower, humming softly, water beating against the tile. I watched the steam cloud the glass door. My reflection wavered behind it, ghost-like. When he stepped out, towel around his waist, I asked, "Did someone use my mirror?" He blinked, confused. "Why would anyone use your mirror?" "It's just, there's lipstick." He looked, shrugged. "You probably used it last week. Stop overanalyzing." His tone was calm, dismissive. The same tone he used when I once asked why Sophie's earring was under our couch. I didn't push. I never did. But I started watching. It's strange how love trains you to notice and ignore at the same time. I could sense the shift, the way he flinched when I touched his arm, how he angled his phone away when texts came in. The late nights at the office. The new cologne that wasn't his usual one. One night, he came home past midnight. I pretended to be asleep, but when he leaned over to kiss my forehead, I caught the faint scent of vanilla and jasmine, Sophie's perfume. It felt like swallowing glass. The next morning, I painted again. A woman standing before a mirror, her reflection smiling while she wept. The colors bled into each other, reds and grays, all murky and restless. I titled it The Truth in Reflection. Ethan didn't see it. He'd stopped noticing anything I did. But Sophie did. She came over 2 days later, breezing in like sunlight and guilt. "You've been distant," she said, kicking off her shoes. "I've been tired," I replied. She leaned against the counter, watching me with those knowing eyes. "You sure everything's okay?" I wanted to scream, "You tell me," but instead I smiled. "Of course." That night, after she left, I saw her reflection in the mirror again, not literally, but in memory. Her lipstick shade. Her perfume, her laugh echoing off my walls. I went to Ethan's jacket pocket, and there it was, her earring, the missing one. My breath hitched. I wanted to deny it again. Maybe he picked it up for her. Maybe she dropped it in his car. Maybe, but the lies were running out of places to hide. The next evening, he said he had a late meeting. I waited an hour, then 2, then something inside me snapped, quiet and final, like a thread breaking. I grabbed my keys, drove downtown. His office lights were off. His car wasn't there. But Sophie's was, parked outside a hotel. I remember sitting there, fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Rain started to fall, soft at first, then heavy. It drummed against the windshield, drowning the sound of my heartbeat. I waited. Half an hour. Then an hour. Then I saw them. Ethan. Sophie. Walking out, laughing. His hand on her lower back, hers on his arm. Like they'd rehearsed it. Like they'd always belonged to each other. The world didn't explode. It just stopped. Everything around me, the rain, the streetlights, the hum of passing cars, became a blur. I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. When he came home later, I was sitting at the kitchen table. He froze for a split second before composing himself. "You're still up." I nodded. "How was your meeting?" He looked me straight in the eyes. "Productive." The silence that followed was sharp. Electric. I wanted to throw the earring at him, to scream, to ask why. But something colder had taken root in me, a clarity that felt like power. So I smiled instead. "I made dinner. You must be hungry." He hesitated, studying my face, maybe wondering if I knew. But he sat down anyway. I served him quietly, each motion deliberate, precise. He ate. I watched. When he finished, I whispered, "Do you love her?" The fork clattered against the plate. He froze. "What are you talking about?" I pushed the earring across the table. It glimmered under the kitchen light like a confession. He stared at it, then back at me, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, "You're being dramatic." That word, dramatic, burned through me. It was the same one he'd used when I'd cried over my paintings, over my mother's illness, over everything that mattered. I stood up. "You could have told me." He didn't apologize. He didn't even deny it this time. He just sighed. "It wasn't supposed to happen." "That makes it better?" "It makes it human," he said quietly. I turned away. Because if I kept looking at him, I might have begged him to love me again, and that would have been worse than losing him. When he left that night to get some air, I went into the bedroom, sat on the floor, pulled out my old photo albums. There was one picture of us in Paris, me holding a camera, him holding me. The sky behind us was silver, just before rain. I stared at it until the image blurred. Then I tore it in half. Half of me, half of him. I found my old ring, the one I'd bought myself months earlier. The symbol of my independence, my reminder that I still existed beyond him. I slid it on my finger again. It felt heavier this time, like it knew what was coming. That night, I didn't sleep. I painted until dawn, broad, chaotic strokes that looked nothing like anything I'd ever created. When I finished, I stepped back. It was the hotel. The rain. Two silhouettes under a streetlight, their faces hidden. The title came easily. The night I stopped waiting. I didn't know what revenge would look like yet. But I knew this. Forgiveness wasn't going to be part of it. It was Sophie's idea to throw the rooftop party. Or at least, that's what Ethan said when he invited me. She wants to celebrate her promotion, he told me, pretending everything was fine, as if we hadn't spent the last week circling each other in silence. You should come. It'll look weird if you don't. It'll look weird. Not, I want you there. Not, I miss you. Just another command disguised as logic. I almost said no. But something inside me, the part that had stopped waiting, said yes. Not for him. Not even for Sophie. For me. If they were going to pretend everything was normal, then I would play along. But this time, I would set the stage. That morning, I found the dress Ethan once called too much. Deep red satin, low back, the kind that caught the light and refused to let go. I wore it anyway. I wanted to look like a wound that glowed. My ring gleamed under the soft lamp as I slipped it on. The silver was cold against my skin, grounding me. A reminder of what I'd reclaimed. I even used Sophie's perfume, the same vanilla jasmine scent that used to haunt my dreams. I wore it like armor. If she'd taken everything else, she could have this last act. My silence, my grace, my vengeance, turned into performance. When I arrived, laughter and music poured from the rooftop like it belonged to another life. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, glasses clinked, the city skyline burned gold in the distance. Sophie saw me first. She froze for a heartbeat, then smiled, that soft, polished smile that once felt like home. Clara, you made it. I hugged her. And in that moment, I smelled my own perfume on her skin. Ethan appeared behind her, holding two champagne flutes. You look. He paused, caught himself. Nice. I smiled. That's the word you're going with? He chuckled nervously, and Sophie looped her arm through his. The sight of it, that casual intimacy, should have destroyed me. But instead, it steadied me. Because now I saw it clearly. I wasn't part of their story anymore. I was the ending they didn't see coming. I mingled. I laughed when expected. I let people believe I was fine. The actress in me, the one he'd trained for years to perform Serenity, was flawless tonight. Every so often, my eyes found them across the crowd. Sophie's hand brushing his sleeve. Ethan leaning in too close when he spoke. The secret language of guilt and desire. And I waited. Patiently. Then the moment came. Someone, maybe Sophie, maybe fate, suggested a toast. To success, someone said. To love, another added. Ethan grinned, lifted his glass. To the people who make life worth living. The irony almost made me laugh. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the tile. Mind if I say something too? All eyes turned to me. Sophie's smile faltered. Ethan's hand tightened on his glass. I held up my own. To truth, I said softly. Because it always finds a way to show itself, eventually. A few chuckles, polite confusion. But I wasn't finished. I want to thank Ethan, I continued, for teaching me the kind of love that feels like silence, and Sophie, for reminding me what betrayal smells like. A hush fell. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" I set my glass down gently, pulled my phone from my purse. See, I used to believe love was about trust. But then I learned, sometimes love is about proof. The screen glowed. Photos, messages, the hotel receipt. I'd gathered it all. Quietly, meticulously. Sophie's face drained of color. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Clara, don't," he started. "Don't what?" I asked. "Tell the truth." For once, his smooth, practiced composure cracked. "This isn't the time." "Oh, but it's the perfect time," I said. "Because everyone here thinks you're the golden couple. The architect with the perfect partner. The friend with the heart of gold. They deserve to know the masterpiece you built together, on top of my trust." Someone gasped. Sophie reached out. "Clara, please." I stepped back. "No. Don't touch me." The words came out steady, almost tender. "You both took everything I gave, my faith, my friendship, my silence, and turned it into something ugly. But the thing about artists, Sophie, we know how to turn pain into presentation." And then I turned the phone around. The photos shown on the screen, Ethan and Sophie, in the hotel lobby, in his car, her hand in his hair. The air left the rooftop like a vacuum. No one spoke. Not even the wind dared to move. Ethan reached for me, desperation flickering in his eyes. "Clara, please, we can fix this." I smiled faintly. "You can't fix what you've already buried." Then I placed the phone on the table, turned, and walked toward the edge of the rooftop, not to jump, but to breathe. Below, the city lights blurred through my tears. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. Behind me, voices rose, confusion, whispers, someone crying. But it was distant now, fading into the hum of traffic below. When I turned back, Ethan was standing alone. Sophie had left, or maybe she'd just disappeared into the crowd. His tie hung loose, his glass shattered at his feet. He tried again. "I made a mistake." I laughed softly. "No, Ethan. You made a choice." He stepped closer, his voice cracking. "You wanted a perfect story. I just gave it to you. Except it's not yours anymore," I said. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. Because the woman in the red dress wasn't the one he'd molded anymore. She was the one who'd outgrown the mold. Before I left, I said one last thing. Quiet, deliberate. "Do you remember when you threw away my painting? The one with the wilted rose?" He nodded faintly. "I repainted it," I said. "But this time, it's not trapped in glass." Then I walked away. The elevator ride down was silent except for my own heartbeat. I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall, the same cracked kind of reflection I'd seen in my old vanity mirror, and for once, it didn't scare me. Because I wasn't broken. I was becoming. When the doors opened, I stepped into the night air, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Goodbye." Not to Ethan. Not even to Sophie. To the version of myself who thought she needed them to be whole. The city stretched before me, endless, alive, indifferent. And I finally understood that revenge didn't always have to scream. Sometimes, it could simply walk away in a red dress and never look back. The next morning, the world was quiet. Not peaceful, just eerily quiet, like the air itself didn't know how to fill the space he'd left behind. The red dress was draped over a chair, smelling faintly of smoke and jasmine. My phone was flooded with messages, some from friends, some from people who'd been at the party, and one from Ethan. Just one. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee and watched the light creep across the floorboards, tracing the same path it used to take when Ethan made pancakes on Sundays. The silence was heavier than grief. It was the kind of silence that follows an earthquake, when you're still counting what's left standing. In the mirror, I saw someone I didn't recognize. Not fragile. Not perfect. Just real. That day, I went through my house, our house, and started reclaiming it piece by piece. I took down the framed wedding photo from the living room wall. My hands didn't shake this time. I placed it face down on the table. The glass cracked a little under pressure, and I let it. It sounded like closure. The perfume bottles on the vanity, I boxed them up. Not because they reminded me of her, but because I didn't need them anymore. My scent didn't have to be borrowed from someone else's approval. As I cleaned, I found the canvas Ethan had thrown out months ago. The rose painting, or what was left of it. Torn, water-stained, forgotten. I set it on the easel again. By sunset, I begun repainting it. Not a wilted rose this time, but one breaking free from the glass it was trapped behind. Petals reaching outward, unapologetically alive. Every brushstroke felt like breathing again. I worked late into the night, lost in the rhythm of creation. My hands were covered in crimson and gold by the time I finished. I stepped back and just looked at it, a rebirth captured in oil and defiance. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I smiled. Days turned into weeks. I stopped checking my phone for messages that didn't come. I started walking every morning, through the park, along the river. I noticed things again, the sound of wind through trees, the way sunlight glittered on puddles after rain, the feeling of my lungs working without tension. One morning, I passed a small art gallery tucked between two cafes. The sign outside read, "Local Artist Showcase, Submissions Welcome." Something inside me stirred. I hesitated at the door, my fingers brushing the old silver wedding ring I still carried in my coat pocket. Not worn, just carried. Like a relic of who I used to be. Inside, the air smelled of paint and wood polish. A kind woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. "Are you here to submit something?" Might be," I said. My voice trembled, but I didn't back away. She handed me a form. "Take your time. The theme is transformation." Transformation. I almost laughed. It felt like the universe had been eavesdropping on my recovery. A week later, I submitted my painting, The Shattered Bloom. The gallery accepted it. The opening night was small but beautiful. Soft music, dim lights, people speaking in low tones. My painting hung near the center, red, gold, alive. People lingered around it, whispering words like strength and freedom. A woman my age touched my arm gently and said, It feels like survival." Her eyes glistened. I nodded. "It is." And in that moment, I realized that healing wasn't loud. It didn't always come with grand declarations or vengeance that burned. Sometimes, healing looked like standing quietly beside your own art, your own proof, and knowing you made it through. Weeks later, Ethan showed up at my door. He looked smaller. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow tiredness. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He stood in the hallway, looking around like he was seeing a museum of his old life. His eyes fell on the painting on the wall, The Shattered Bloom. "You repainted it," he said softly. "Yes," I replied. "This one doesn't wilt." He nodded, silent. Then, finally, "I'm sorry." I believed him, but it didn't matter anymore. "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't rebuild what you tore down. It just names the rubble." He looked down, his voice almost a whisper. "I lost everything." I shook my head gently. "You didn't lose it. You gave it away." He sighed. "I still love you, Clara." I smiled, not bitterly, just knowingly. You love the idea of me. The one who kept forgiving, the one who made you look like a better man. She's gone. He didn't argue. Maybe for the first time in his life, he knew there was nothing left to win. As he turned to leave, I said, "Ethan." He stopped. "Thank you," I said softly, "for breaking me open. I needed the space to grow." He blinked, nodded once, and left. The door clicked shut with a kind of finality that echoed through the house. And then, silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. A month later, the gallery called. My painting had sold. To a private collector who left a note. For my daughter, who's learning to begin again. I cried, not out of sadness, but gratitude. Because somehow, my story had found its way into someone else's healing too. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. I opened my hand and looked at the silver ring one last time. It no longer looked like a promise. It looked like an anchor. I walked to the balcony, felt the cool air on my face, and let it fall. The ring tumbled into the dark. Small, insignificant, gone. In its place, I touched the small gold pendant I now wore, a tiny rose, the color of sunlight. A symbol not of what I'd lost, but of what I'd found, myself. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Made coffee. Opened the curtains. The world was still quiet, but now it was the kind of quiet that held promise. And for the first time, I didn't dread the day. I was ready for it. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't crash through your door or announce itself in fireworks. It comes like morning light, soft, inevitable, impossible to ignore once it touches your skin. 6 months had passed since the rooftop. Since Ethan's last visit. Since I dropped that ring into the night and watched it vanish into the dark. I thought that was the end of our story. But endings, I've learned, are rarely so clean. It started with an email. From an unknown sender. Subject line, Art Commission Inquiry. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. But something, intuition, maybe, made me open it. Ms. Bennett, I recently attended your gallery show. Your painting, The Shattered Bloom, moved me deeply. I'm curating a series on women and reclamation, and I'd like to feature your work and your story in a short film. Are you interested? My heart stuttered. My story. 4 years, I'd lived under someone else's narrative. The supportive wife, the quiet friend, the forgiver. Now, someone wanted my version. The truth. I replied before I could overthink it. Yes, I'd be honored. A month later, I stood in a small film studio. Bright lights, white walls, the smell of fresh coffee and camera equipment. The director, a woman named Elise, greeted me with a hug. She had the kind of warmth that felt instantly safe. You've been through something extraordinary, she said gently. We just want you to tell it, in your own words. There it was again. My own words. They set up the camera. The red light blinked on. I took a deep breath. And for the first time, I told it all, not as a victim, not as a warning, but as a witness. I spoke of the early love that felt like sunlight and of the slow corrosion that followed. I spoke of Sophie's laughter that once sounded like music and later like sirens. I spoke of the night I found the messages, the night I painted, the rooftop. I even spoke of the silence after. My voice didn't shake. Not once. Elise sat across from me, listening. No interruptions, no pity. Just presence. When we finished, she said quietly, that wasn't just survival, Clara. That was rebirth. Something inside me unclenched. Maybe she was right. The documentary aired 3 months later. Small production, limited audience. But it spread, quietly, powerfully. Messages began trickling in. From women. from strangers, from survivors. One wrote, "Your story saved me. I left him today." Another said, "I thought I was crazy. Then I watched you and realized I wasn't alone." Each message felt like a seed, planted in the soil of something larger than my pain. And for the first time, I understood the purpose of my suffering wasn't just to endure it. It was to transform it into something that helped others find their way out of the dark too. Then, one evening, as autumn wind rattled the window panes, I got another message. This one, from Ethan. "I saw the film. You were incredible. I'm sorry, again. I'm in therapy now. I wish I'd been the man you thought I was." I stared at the words for a long time. Old pain tried to stir, but it couldn't take root anymore. I typed one sentence. "I wish you healing." Then I archived the message. Not out of anger, out of peace. Because some chapters don't need closure. They just need to stop being reread. Winter came. I painted through it. Women standing in the rain, flowers growing through cracks, light breaking through broken glass. Every canvas felt like another piece of my voice returning. One painting, in particular, I called "The Bloom After the Fire." It showed a single red rose blooming from the ashes of a burned field, its petals open, unafraid, defiantly alive. When the gallery displayed it, I stood before it quietly, watching people interpret it in their own ways. Some saw grief. Some saw victory. I saw balance, the beauty of having burned and survived the burning. A year later, I visited my hometown, the place I'd once left to chase a love that promised forever. The same streets, the same bakery, the same whispering sea. But I was no longer the girl who'd walked away in blind devotion. At my old family house, my mother hugged me tight. "You look different," she said. "Lighter." "I feel different," I admitted. "Free." That evening, we sat on the porch, watching the horizon swallow the sun. My mother looked at me over her teacup. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked softly. I smiled faintly. "Sometimes, but not with anger. More like gratitude, maybe. He broke something in me I was never meant to keep." She nodded. "Then maybe that's how we grow." We sat in silence, the kind of silence that no longer hurt. A few months later, the film won a small award. Elise sent me a message. "You've helped more people than you know." And though I didn't need recognition, something about that validation, that my pain had meaning beyond itself, made me cry in the gentlest way. That night, I painted one last piece in the series. Not of roses or glass or fire. This one was of a woman standing in a mirror, her reflection not broken, not distorted, but whole. I called it Self-Portrait After Healing. Sometimes, when I think back to that girl at the rooftop, trembling, heart in ruins, holding her phone like a weapon, I want to reach out and tell her, "You won't just survive this. You'll rebuild yourself so beautifully that even the pain will kneel before your strength." Because I did. The woman I am now doesn't need revenge to feel powerful. She doesn't need to prove anything. She simply exists, truthfully, peacefully, artfully. And maybe that's the quietest, fiercest form of justice there is. One last image lingers with me, even now. The night I dropped the ring, the sound it made as it vanished into the dark, a soft metallic note, swallowed by silence. Sometimes I imagine it lying there still, deep in the earth, buried beneath rain and roots. And somewhere above it, a rose growing wild, reaching for the light. Because that's what I did. I grew above what tried to bury me. And now, when I walk past a mirror, I don't flinch. I smile. Because the reflection looking back at me is no longer someone's wife, or someone's mistake, or someone's lesson. She's just me. Alive. Whole. Free. End of story. At a party with her friends, I proposed to my girlfriend. She replied, "I'd rather stay single than be with you." A story of betrayal, rebirth, and the quiet art of becoming your own masterpiece.